What does it do, YouTube? Welcome back to another episode of Scotty Says. I am your host. Happy New Year, my friends, and welcome to 2023. Now, before we get underway with this week's episode, I want to send out positive vibrations and hopes for a speedy recovery to Mr. Hamlin. Now, reports are Hamlin remains in critical condition. He is hospitalized. Reportedly, he is unable to breathe on his own. Reports are that his heart stopped twice, once at the game on the field, and then a second time at the hospital. He has been resuscitated twice, and the reports are that the compressions on his chest from CPR were so intense that his chest cavity and ribs have sustained damage. And so he remains in a very, very difficult place in the hospital, and we're wishing nothing but the best for him and for his recovery. I was watching that game. At the time I saw the tackle, it looked very routine. He jumped up and then went down. And of course, the game would not be played. Now, as an aside note, Sniff Bayless tweeted at this point, when the game was still hanging in the balance as to whether or not it would be played, that he didn't understand how the game could be made up. And I tell you what, Twitter came for him. Apparently, Sniff Bayless has created a lot of animosity over the course of his career. The athletes don't care for him. And to be perfectly honest, neither do I. But I have said he must be a very intelligent guy, because he has found a way to make a fortune by sitting up talking about the same subjects day in and day out. Them damn Dallas Cowboys and Tom Brady and his disdain for the GOAT, the King, LeBron James. So, I mean, he strikes me as a little boy in an old man's body. And apparently this time he went too far. Even his partner, I call him Big Buck Huck, Shannon Sharpe, did not show up for work today. He didn't want to sit across from him because they came hard for him. Folks were talking about smacking him and that he's sick and twisted. And, you know, I can't disagree with any of those sentiments. So, this time, old Sniff stepped in it. He was forced to make an apology on air. Now, it was a fake apology, to be sure, but finally, FS1 forced him to own up to his reckless behavior on air via an apology. So, I'm very interested to see if old Big Buck Huck will return tomorrow to continue their ongoing daily diatribes about the Dallas Cowboys and Tom Brady. Whew. And I'll be honest with you, the only reason I watch that show is because of Shannon Sharpe. So enough said there. Now, on to lighter topics. Let's turn the page to the LA Rams. They are just about out of their misery this season. There is only one game remaining coming up this Sunday, the final regular season game for the Rams up in Seattle. And the last game they played at the Palace in Inglewood against the LA Chargers really illustrated just how far the Rams have fallen. To be perfectly honest with you, they just look outmanned, outgunned, outclassed by the Chargers. And the Chargers aren't world beaters. But this goes to show you just how far the LA Rams have fallen from their Super Bowl less than a year ago. And so, let's get right to the game analysis. Now, to start the inactive list. Who was inactive for the Rams against the Chargers? Well, the Wolford was inactive. Stoney, the stone-handed one, was also inactive. Reports are Stoney is done for the season. And to be perfectly honest with you, if I had my druthers, he'd be done completely with the Rams unless he's a gunner on special teams. They're not going to be successful with these mitts as a wide receiver in the NFL. So, AD 99, the Beast, of course, out, done for the season. So, despite the offensive line problems, that O-line shuffle all season long, I want to give a shout out to offensive lineman Rob Havenstein. Rob Havenstein is one of only 2 LA Rams who were originally St. Louis Rams. Rob Havenstein and AD 99 the Beast are the only 2 remaining St. Louis Rams who are still Los Angeles Rams. And Rob Havenstein deserves special recognition for being the only offensive lineman who started every game this season for the LA Rams. So despite the O-line shuffle, Rob Havenstein remained consistent and played every game. So shout out to Rob Havenstein. To the game. McGenius started out the game on offense in 12 personnel. I hope you saw last week's episode where I went more in depth about the offensive adjustment that McWonder made from his preferred, familiar, typical, predictable 11 personnel to a 12 personnel offensive grouping. And that 12 personnel paid dividends. Now, against the Chargers, he started off in 12 personnel. That's 2 tight ends, 2 wide receivers, and a back. But then he very quickly shifted back to 11 personnel and pretty much stayed in 11 personnel for the majority of the game. Now, the commentators remarked during the game that it was so unusual for McGenius to be in 12 personnel that they asked them about it in the course of the run-up to the Chargers game. And McGenius apparently told them that he made the adjustment not because of offensive brilliance, but because he really had no other choice, that he was forced into that adjustment. And I had given him credit in last week's episode for making the adjustment, even though I said he made the adjustment way too late to make a difference. Now we come to find out he didn't make the adjustment because he was being innovative. He just was scraping the bottom of the barrel, and that's what he came up with, and I guess it worked inadvertently. And so I take back some of the credit that I gave McGenius because he didn't even intentionally make this adjustment. He stumbled upon it out of necessity. And hey, you know, some of the greatest inventions in history probably were stumbled upon as opposed to set out upon. I'll give him that. But I wish he would have tried to stay more in 12 personnel against the Chargers because he had such great success with it in the previous game. He did not, however. But to start the game, he began in 12 personnel with Higbee. Of course, there's no soup. And Bryson Hopkins. His 2 wide receivers were Brandon Powell and the imaginary, a.k.a. the real, also known as Drip Jefferson. And then at tailback, Cam the Grill Akers, who had another exceptional day toting the rock. And so Baker Mayfield, the Baker, was again, of course, running the show, as he will be in this final game coming up in Seattle. And the Rams got out to a 3-0 lead, but that would be the last lead the Rams would scuffle out on the day. To start the second quarter, the Rams up 3-0 when Ashes got shaked and then baked by Mike Williams for a big gainer, and that was followed up very shortly thereafter by Austin Eckler toting it in 7-3 Chargers. And the Chargers would not relinquish their lead on the day, although the Rams did try to fight back in the first half, and we've seen this pattern before. And Drip Jefferson, Drip with a big 39-yard completion from the Baker. And I have to say here, what is up with Drip? First, the imaginary had one chain. Then, after that catch to win the Raider game, Drip had 2 chains. And now he's got 2 chains plus a big crucifix diamond encrusted hanging from his neck, running around at wide receiver. And I remember thinking it's a good thing the chain snatcher has retired from the league. You remember him, don't you? Aqib Talib. He played for the Rams for a minute. The chain snatcher Talib. Oh, he wouldn't have been able to resist snatching Drip's chains if he was still in the NFL. But I digress. So after a grounding penalty on the Baker, the Rams have to punt it back to the Chargers. And immediately, Austin Eckler breaks off a big 72-yard gash play on the ground for the touchdown. And the Rams are down 14-3. The Rams get the ball back, and after a couple of nice completions to Drip Jefferson, then Cam the Grill got to grilling, and he had almost 100 yards in the first half. And so, on a 23-yard run from Malcolm Brown for pay dirt, the Rams pull the score closer, 14-10. Problem is, the Rams would not score the rest of the day. And as I mentioned, this is an all too familiar pattern with the Rams. No second half points. So from 17-10 to start the third quarter to a final score of 31-10, the Rams just looked outclassed, in my opinion. And so the Rams fall to a pitiful 5-11. The worst Super Bowl defense by any team in NFL history. And next up, as I mentioned, the Seahawks in Seattle. Now, the dynamic with this final game of the regular season is the Seahawks need this game to make the playoffs. It's a true spoiler game. If Seattle wins, they're in the playoffs. If they lose, they're out. So they have all the motivation in the world to win against LA. Now, I'm sure Bobby Wagner, who's played great all season, will be up for the challenge, and I expect the Rams will put up a fight, but I don't see them holding the Seahawks out of the playoffs as a spoiler. And so that will finish the Rams off, probably and most likely at 5-12. And so as the season winds to a merciful end for these LA Rams, I will only say this. Life can be so fickle, so fleeting, so unpredictable that take advantage of the opportunities you have when you have them. Don't put off for another day what you really want to do and ought to do today. Show the people that you care about that you love them. Do the things that you most want to do while you have the opportunity. And in the case of Damar Hamlin, I can only wish for a speedy and healthy recovery. Sometimes life can be oh so short. So, until next time, my friends, what I need you to do is throw me one of these. Throw it to me now. Please subscribe if you haven't already. Leave me a comment. Let me know what you're thinking. Until next time, my friends, once again, Happy New Year. One love.